tea. Yum, yum, ready to go. Turn that off and check on my yummy, delicious big pot of stew. I can't wait to eat that. Oh, it smells so good. Oh, my mouth is, wow. Hi, guys. I didn't know you were there. Well, I was inspired by my story. Thank you, Amu, to cook a delicious pot of stew for tonight's dinner. But I would like to share my story with you, so thank you for joining me. This is Thank You, Amu, and it's written by Oge Mora. And Oge Mora is a young woman. Here's a picture of what she looks like so you can see. And she is the author of the story and the illustrator. She drew the pictures and she won an award for these amazing pictures. She did this by a method called collage, which meant that she painted some paper, she cut some paper, she put it all together and created the pictures that you see. It's just amazing. She also won this very special award, the Coretta Scott King Award for new, and the John Steptoe Award for New Talent. So she is an African-American woman, and she told us a little bit about how she came up with the story. She tells us about this at the end, but in the very beginning, it says, a note to the reader, that's us. And it looks like Omu, and I have to admit that I always thought it was Omu until I read her message. Omu is pronounced Amu, Amu, and it is the Igbo term for queen. So what I read in the back is that her family came from the country of Nigeria. It's on the continent of Africa. And they called her grandmother Amu because that meant queen. So they thought of their grandmother as the queen of their family. I thought that was so pretty. And evidently her grandmother loved to cook big meals for lots of people and share with everyone. And so I think this story is based on her grandmother. So thank you, Amu. And here we go, by Oge Mora. Thank you, Oge, for writing this wonderful story. And you know what? I'm just going to take the cover and I'm going to put it out of the way so I don't keep getting my fingers caught. Thank you, Amu. And our story takes place in a city. So maybe some of you who are watching this live in the city and think about the buildings, how they're very often very close together, and sometimes people live in just a part of the building, and that's called an apartment. So in this story, Amu lives in an apartment building. So the living area that she lives on is just on one floor of the building. Here is Amu. This is so neat. She's walking home. It looks like she's walking home from the store with her shopping bag. She lives at 55 whatever street, and she's going to go into her apartment and probably go up the steps and do some cooking. But you can imagine if somebody's cooking something really yummy and they have the window open, you might be smelling it, and that could lead to something. Thank you, Amu. Here she is. Ah, yes, she is cooking. On the corner of First Street and Long Street, on the very top floor, Amu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. She seasoned it and stirred it and took a small taste. You can see. Do you ever do that when you're cooking? Just stick your finger in, taste it. I do that a lot with icing. What a delicious stew, Amu said. Tonight's dinner will surely be the best I have ever had. And with that, Amu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. There she is, sitting. You can see her through her apartment window reading her book. There's her stew. As the thick red stew simmered on the stove, the scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, down the street, around the block until someone was knocking at the door. And when Amu opened it, she saw a little boy. Amu exclaimed, "What brings you to my home?" He said, "I was playing with my race car down the hall when I smelled the most delicious smell. What is it?" "Well, it's my thick red stew." Stew. He sighed. "That sure sounds yummy." Well, Omu thought for a moment. She was saving her stew for dinner, but she had made quite a bit, and it would not hurt to share. "Would you like some?" The little boy nodded. And so Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. And the little boy remembered his manners and said, "Thank you, Amu." And then, after he finished, he went on his way. Now, I'll just show you, there's a little thing we can do. As we're reading the story, there's some clues that tell us what's going to happen next. So here, you might have noticed the little boy playing with his car in the apartment below Amu's. And then he showed up at her door. Let's see what happens next. With that, after the boy left, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. And as she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window, out the door, down the hall, toward the street, around the block. And then, once more, she heard a knock, knock. Someone was at the door. When Amu opened the door, this time she saw a police officer. "Miss Police Officer," Amu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" And the police officer replied, "I was on duty down the street when I smelled the most delicious smell." "What is it?" "It's my thick red stew," said Amu. "Ah, stew," she said, and her mouth watered. "That sounds mighty tasty." Well, Amu thought for a moment. There was still enough to share. "Would you like some?" The police officer nodded. Once again, Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. The police officer said, before she left and after finishing her stew, "Thank you, Amu." I don't know if I pointed out to you, but I love the way Amu's stew looks like flowers. I think that's a nice way of showing how yummy that stew must be and how good it must smell. So for the second time, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. But sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window, out the door, down the hall, toward the street, around the block, until there was a knock, knock, knock at the door. Again, someone was at Amu's door. This time, when she opened it, who do you think she saw? Well, there goes the police officer. This is the hot dog vendor. And this is a construction worker. Let's see. The hot dog vendor? And that's just what Amu said. What brings you to my home? Well, I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell. What is it? Mr. Hot Dog Vendor asked. It's my thick red stew, replied Amu. Oh, stew. And the vendor licked his lips. That sounds quite delectable. That's a big word, isn't it? Delectable. That sounds very much like another word we use to describe something that tastes very yummy. Delicious. Delicious. Delectable and delicious. Well, this time Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Oh, he just likes smelling it as much as eating it, doesn't he? Thank you, Amu, the hot dog vendor said. And he went on his way. I'll tell you, that must be some really good smelling stew, because I think hot dogs cooking smells really yummy when you smell them in a street vendor's cooking stand. Well, throughout the day, people from all across the neighborhood knocked on Amu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, a singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker, even the mayor stopped by. And each time they knocked, Amu shared. Soon the sky darkened, the street lights brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Amu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, the pot was empty. Not a drop left for Amu. Oh, look how sad Amu looks. Got her head resting on her hand, her chin resting on her hand. Amu sniffled. There goes the best dinner I ever had. Sorry and blue, she sat at the table with her empty pot until she heard a knock, 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 knock. Lots of knocking, lots of knocking. Who could that be, Amu wondered. And this time, when she opened her door, she saw the little boy. There he is. The police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker. Why, everyone she fed today was at her door. Almost sighed. I'm sorry, everyone. My thick red stew is all gone, and I have nothing left to share. The little boy tugged at Amu's sleeve and said, Don't worry, Amu. We are not here to ask. We are here to give. And then the police officer carried in a fresh salad. The mayor entered with a roast chicken. The baker brought a collection of sweet goodies. Even the little boy presented Amu with something special in a shiny red envelope. What could that be? Everyone who had knocked on Amu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment, and together they ate and danced and celebrated. While Amu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. Surrounded by all of her neighbors and community members, the little boy. No wonder her heart feels good. That dinner was the best she ever had. And here's what the note said in the little boy's handwriting. Thank you, Amu. Oh, I love that story. I hope you like it too. I just think it's such a nice message about sharing and caring, saying thank you, showing your appreciation. That's a really lovely story about the community all taking care of each other. So nice. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. So bye. I gotta get back to my cooking and my big thick red stew, and I hope it smells as good as Elmo's.